Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here to show you the Spiritborn build. This build has been really popular. I say the Spiritborn build, the meta one, Quill Volley, which has been a super popular build built around this core skill that gets you up to like trillions of damage. I saw somebody had a hit that was like a quadrillion something the other day. It basically, you get the damage on this up into the multiple billions, right? So each little feather that you throw with this is like multiple billions, and then this thing, this first choice in your spirit hall, the Jaguar one, will hit for the like trillions or hundreds of billions or quadrillions for this one guy, I guess. Um, but basically, this is like the meta build. This is the strongest build. It's the damage is kind of breaking the game. But I was gonna basically show how I'm doing it. You see here, my gear is all ancestral, right? I got stars on everything, but I don't have any mythics. I haven't gone to great lengths to min max it. I have gotten lucky on a couple rolls, right? I have some stuff that's pretty good, but I haven't like put all the resources in and the time in and everything to like super min max it or anything. And with no mythics, and without min maxing it, I'm over here. I have cleared. I cleared a 126 a little while ago. Um, you can see I have the 127 available because I cleared the 126. I might make a video of like a 125 or something, or maybe a 120. The 120 is a little faster. It's a little more fun. Usually when I push, I turn the numbers off because this build just covers your screen in numbers. You can't see what you're doing half the time with it. So I usually turn the numbers off, which makes it a little less fun to watch when I'm pushing. So maybe I'll do like a 120 with the numbers on. You can see some three or 4 trillion hits in there, and yeah, I was just gonna show basically how I do it. It's mostly the same way that the majority of people are doing it. There are a couple tweaks that I do, but yeah, show you how to do it. How I'm clearing like 125s with no mythics, and then talk a little bit about just the build as a whole. So the first thing is obviously in your gear, you need uh you need the rod of Crackalacky here that um, that crackalax on people. Basically this one is going to make it so that when anytime your resource is completely full, you crit and you get this big crit damage multiplier on it. That the crit damage multiplier is actually not as important as some things. It's nice if it's rolled well, but really the main thing is when your resource is full, you're going to crit, and then that number that's yellow in there, the chance for core skills to hit twice, that's actually really good too. Ideally, that would actually be orange. I would have hit it 3 times with my masterwork, but yeah, it didn't happen. So um, yeah, that's basically those are the really big things on this. That core skills hit twice actually works on every feather, so it happens a ton. It basically it's the randomness wouldn't change on average anyway, but because you spread it out over feathers, it's more reliable. You get it on the regular, and it counts as hits for like your jaguar thing too. So you proc the jaguar thing a ton and get big numbers and all that stuff. The jaguar thing being this. So that thing obviously is a requirement for the build. It's not that hard to get. It drops off the bosses. I think Duriel and Andariel both drop it. I think, and yeah, it's not too bad to get when you get one. That starts the build basically. The Ring of Midnight Sun is really good. You really want a high roll on the unique trait. You can see I have one that's 50% here. Ideally, you get one that's 50%. If you get one that's like at least above 40, it's probably usable. Preferably in the mid to high 40s, but ideally 50%. And then this one, it has a star, but the star is on Mirage, which is a skill that sucks. So the star is only useful because it makes the item level 800 instead of 750. And then as you do this, you use Yen's blessing. Really, honestly, because of the resist all, you can see when I was masterworking, I hit it twice. So it's 85% now. When you get into Torment 4, you get these huge debuffs on your armor and resistances. So if you want to have any armor and resistance, you need this resist all somewhere. You need a huge stack of it. Yen's blessing is kind of the best place to get it. So I've gotten a few that have starred resist all on them, and I rolled this one. It got hit twice. It was good, right? So you can see I got my resistances maxed. I know people are playing it without, but I personally always max my armor and my resistances for whatever difficulty level that I'm in. Um, and then finally the last unique thing that you need is this Banished Lord's Talisman, right? And this one's just going to make you overpower. I got a star on the max life, which is probably the best place to get a star on this thing. And then on my unique trait on it is really good too, so that was good luck too. But then the other gear is just legendary gear. It has, you know, stars on stuff that I was like hoping for on some of it, stars on stuff that I settled for on some of it. And then we are tempering barrier generation, and this I put crit damage, but generally barrier generation and basic damage. Okay, and then the Yen's Blessing also has resource generation, so you don't need to put it. I had a ring with it on it, and then when I switched from whatever else I was using to Yen's Blessing, I got a ring that I didn't temper resource generation on it, because you get the resource generation from Yen's Blessing. So you get the resist all, you get the resource generation. So these make a really nice addition to the build. They just basically free you up to get other stats on your other things, right? And then the boot slot, you're not the opportunity cost of like other aspects and things isn't huge, right? So like on your neck, when you put this neck on, if you're going to use a unique neck, it has to be really good, because you could put an aspect on it and get the 1.5 multiplier. So a neck needs to be really good to use. Boots or just kind of whatever. So it's not a huge deal to use unique ones that have kind of a throwaway unique trait. This unique trait isn't the worst, but like it's nothing to write home about, right? So I'm not going to go super far into how the build works. I can make another video on how some of the mechanics work and how you might use that knowledge to do kind of build crafting and stuff if you want to play other stuff. But the way that I do it, obviously the main things are, we want this Jaguar thing, we want a way to proc it and get huge numbers off of it. That's where the Quill Volley comes in. We want this, we want the Rod of Crackalacky here, and the Ring of the Midnight Sun. I know that this is Kepaleke, but Crackalaki's more fun. The Ring of the Midnight Sun, we want those two things to make us always crit, right? Alongside the resource generation. So these two things with 100% resource generation are making me always crit. And then my resource pool being big enough is making me always overpower. And so every swing is critting and overpowering, right? That's the gist of the build. And then we make our crit damage go through the roof with this aspect, right, of redirected force, and this one of interdiction. And then we're stacking. You see I'm putting max resolve stacks all over the place, right? Because that's boosting my damage through this one, through interdiction. It's giving me all this block chance, and then the redirected force is turning that block chance into crit damage. So my crit damage when I'm fighting, I think right now it's like, yeah, it's only 1500. When I actually go outside town and put on the armored hide, so that I get my like 24 stacks of resolve or whatever it is, and then I actually block somebody and all that stuff, this crit damage gets up to like 20,000. So that's what makes our numbers so absurdly huge. That and the viscous shield with a great big health pool, and then this thing, my rune word, giving me 20%. Some other skills in the tree giving me more health, right? Proccing health, and then this thing with the viscous shield. This is how we get ourselves shielded for a barrier for all of our health, right? So this thing is going to barrier. The bulwark gives 45%, but then on my gear and stuff with all this barrier generation, you see I have gems that give barrier generation too. You want to get this to 125. You can see I'm a little over, so there's a little bit of wasted stat in there, but I'm at 127, so I barrier for 100% of my gigantic health pool, and then that gives me an absurd damage buff from viscous shield, right? So I'm kind of assuming with this video that you know the gist of how it works. There's lots of videos out there on how it works, so this is just kind of my like take on it. In the Paragon tree, I put spirit down here, and I went ahead and put lots and lots of dexterity into it. You can see I didn't have a mythic item at all, and my gear is good, but it's not super optimized. But you can see I do have a lot of Paragon points, right? I've played the game, I've gotten some XP, and I have lots of Paragon points to spend. So I went ahead and put lots of dexterity points in here so that I get lots of crit damage out of the spirit thing. You can see I'm getting 467% crit damage out of spirit here. And then as I go up in the tree, I'm making sure I get lots of resist all again so that I can be capped. And then up here, I'm using Outmatch. A lot of people use Hubris here. Hubris, if I throw it in, where is it? If I put it in the thing, you can see that it gives more max resource, right? It gives 39 max resource, whereas my Outmatch gives 22. If you can be at a high enough resource to always overpower, to overpower with every swing, right? If you're close enough to 275, Outmatch I found is better because it increases your damage on bosses from the Jaguar proc. Okay, but otherwise it doesn't matter. If you need to use Hubris to get higher up there on your resource, then do it. Also, the Hubris here, you can see the legendary is 10% damage to vulnerable targets, which is fine. We make everything vulnerable with Quill Volley, but this one is 12% when I'm healthy, and that is also a bigger damage buff on that Jaguar proc because I am always healthy, right? Because I'm always barriered, so my health never goes away. And then over here in this tree where I'm taking convergence. This tree, by the way, is sapping. If you don't know, sapping is the one that gives you your max resource. In the convergence tree, I stuck Talon in here. I have a bunch of dexterity taken to buff the eagle damage, but I'm still kind of like laying points in there as I get more Paragon levels. Okay, on this side, and this is the 5th board, by the way. This is the last board. I actually went 1 here, 2, 3, and then 4, right? With the baseboard being actual like 0. In this one, this is our Viscous Shield tree. I put Colossal in here, which gives us the damage per resolve stack, right? Increases damage with Gorilla Skills, which doesn't matter at all. So really, you just want enough strength in here to get your damage per resolve stack. And I actually have too much. I just haven't changed it. I was playing Crushing Hand instead, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I was playing Crushing Hand instead of Quill Volley, and when I switched back to Quill Volley, it looks like I didn't take some of the strength points out, right? So I could take some of these points out of here and bring my strength down, where I'm just kind of getting strength as I go past the tree, right? So I just have the 25. That's all you really need when you're playing Quill Volley, okay? And then we go down in here where we get Revealing, right? So we get this chance to knock down vulnerable enemies, and we get damage to crowd controlled enemies. And down in this one, I have Fulminate. Pretty much everybody uses Fulminate. It's just for damage on the Jaguar proc, basically. Okay. Okay. Wait, is that right? No. Everybody uses Fulminate because it buffs your quills. Sorry. It doesn't buff the Jaguar thing. The Jaguar thing is not buffed by non-physical damage. You're using this one to buff your quills. The actual, like, the skill, the Quill Volley. The Jaguar proc is natural damage, so it's not buffed by these like non-physical damage buffs, and it is buffed by something like damage to close enemies or damage to vulnerable enemies, things like that, or just percent damage, right? Like this one's just 10% damage. That buffs that skill when it comes through. But this buffs that skill just by because it does a percent of the damage that you do. This is buffing it by just like making you do more damage while you're proccing it. Okay, so that the only thing really in the Paragon tree that I do very different from most people is this outmatch glyph. Almost everybody I've seen is using Hubris or Menagerist here. I use outmatch. As far as I can tell, it's a little bit better. I've been able to clear higher with outmatch than I was able to with the other glyphs. And then in the Paragon tree also, I'm taking maximum life every time it's available. I'm taking the time, the points to go over and grab it, right? So always grab your max life when it's available, because the viscous shield thing, and then also because you're overpowering your damage scales absurdly with max health. It's like the best thing you can get to scale your damage, right? And then you're as a kind of side effect more tanky too. Okay, and then the other things that I do, this and this are non-negotiable, right? The uniques are non-negotiable. Everybody uses Moonrise on this thing, as they should. It's really, really good. And then this, I use this thing that when you dodge, you fortify and you get fortified. The reason I use that is because every hit that I do overpowers, and overpower uses fortify just like its health. So this actually buffs your damage tremendously to fortify yourself. And this one, ferocity, increasing your max ferocity, your hunter ult overcaps your ferocity by 4 every time you pop it. So when your max ferocity is higher, you just get more stacks and get more attack speed out of it. And then in the skill tree, there's some extra crit damage from it too. So this one I found, I've used stuff, I've seen people using more damage to feared enemies because you're using Scourge. I've seen people use the one that like slows guys that are close to you, and then you do more damage to slowed enemies. But honestly, I found that the ferocity gives me more damage, and even if it's about the same when you're clearing most things, it's better on the boss because you can't slow or fear bosses. So those ones aren't helping you on a boss, and this one is because the ferocity is just there and you're always getting all the benefits from it. And the same thing with the fortify. It's not conditional, it's just always there. And so I found these things are my best clears, my best choices, because I can clear ads with them, right? It's buffing my damage, and then the damage is still there when I'm fighting something like a boss or something that has a ton of health, right? So almost everything in the game you're just one-shotting with this build, but when you are in a 125-ish like pit, now the boss has enough health that you have to fight him for at least a little while, and your DPS matters more and more as the boss has more and more health, right? So that's basically how I'm doing it. I was going to show, as you're kind of building up to it with your character, when you don't have this, you put this affix on your neck, so you get more crit damage from that, right? You take advantage of the fact that the neck overbuffs affixes, so you put that on there. And then you also use things like, where is it? This Mask of Ebawaka that is going to buff. You can see my masterwork rolls on this one were awful, but this one, it buffs your damage by like 90% because of each spirit type. And in your class thing, we're using spirits that are both not eagle, and so we end up getting 3 different spirit types on it. So that one can give a lot of damage before you get to where you've got your resolve stacks done really well. You're getting your overpower, like all of that stuff. This can be a good kind of stopgap as you're leveling up your character to get some damage in there. And then you basically just build it from the ground up, right? The first thing is to get these 2 things and get enough resource generation that you're always critting, right? And then kind of as you're doing that, you're getting your crit damage going with this stuff, right? You can start with the crit damage thing right away. It's just if you're not always critting, you're only taking advantage of it on some of your hits. And you can start with the viscous shield thing, the health stacking, and the getting your barrier generation tempered onto things right away as well, right? So you're starting with like the viscous shield thing, you're getting your kind of resolve stacks up, and your block chance and your crit damage up. At the same time, you're trying to get your resource going, and then as you get all that together, when you get your total resource high enough, that's when we get to put on this Banished Lord's Talisman, right? And we have to be able to have our 100% resource generation, our 100% barrier generation, our big enough pool, all of that stuff without using the neck, because this neck gives none of that, right? So we have to be able to have all of that with an empty neck slot, and then when we have that, we get to put this on, overpower every hit, and go crazy on the damage, okay? So that's kind of how we build it up as we go. Start with the viscous shield and the crit damage, get these 2 things. When you have these 2 things, make sure you get your resource generation to 100%, so that you're critting on every hit, and then worry about your pool here, your vigor pool, and then get that high enough that you can proc this thing every single swing. And when you can proc this thing every swing, that's when you put the neck on, okay? If you're proccing this like every other swing, it's probably not worth just having this affix on your neck and the maybe Mask of Ebawaka on instead, okay? This thing can be really, really good up until our overpower and stuff is so good that the max health and the crit damage and stuff is worth it, right? So at some point it becomes, I was playing with this earlier today. I was playing with putting this mask back on, and it wasn't really any more damage than the way that I'm built now, and it's because I have a huge amount of health on the hat, and I have 7 resolve stacks on the hat. So giving those up, even for this like 90% damage buff that goes in the multiplicative bucket, it wasn't making a difference, right? It was about the same. Ultimately, this one, the mask, this isn't even the one I wore. I wore one that didn't have a star on it for a long, long time. But this is what I wore kind of while I was building my character up and kind of getting into Torment 4 and like getting all the things I needed to have the character's damage go into the land of absurdity. And then the last thing I was going to talk about is maybe I'll put out a video where I clear like a 100 pit with this and with like crushing hands or something. But truthfully, this build, while it does so much damage, it only matters when you're pushing pits. Everything else in the game, even on Torment 4, you can absolutely blaze through with other builds and with builds that don't do even close to as much damage with this one, right? Like when I play Crushing Hands, I think it's a little bit more fun personally, and it can clear a 100 in pretty close to the same time as this build, because it does AoE and they both kind of move similarly. They clear hundreds in very similar times. But then as I go up and then mobs have more and more health, you get to take more and more advantage of this thing specifically, this Jaguar proc. And this build, the Quill Volley build, takes advantage of this proc much, much better than Crushing Hands does. And so as the mobs have tons and tons of health and you have to really like beat on them more, this build takes over, and this build can push higher keys. But until that happens, they're about the same. And honestly, in a lot of places, the Crushing Hands is a little better because it does a great big area of effect damage and still one-shots everything. So this build, the one thing I would say is you shouldn't feel like you're like locked into or pressed into this build, because a lot of different builds can clear Torment 4 stuff without any like problem, like absolutely just blaze through it. So in that case, there's not really any like strong reason to have this build. Even I did the little raid thing the other day, the little raid multi-person raid dungeon, whatever it's called, down here. And I did this thing the other day, and honestly, even there, the boss's health just disappears so fast, because it's just Torment 4 content. So you don't need the amount of damage that this build has to do this thing either. And in fact, it's not even helping. Like the boss's health, there's lots of other builds where you could just delete the boss's health just like this build does. So the bosses have these like hard mechanics that stop you. They make them immune, so they stop you from killing them, and you have to do like the mechanics of the fight and stuff like that. Their health bar goes gray, so that's how they stop you from killing them too fast, versus like Duriel or Andariel or something where you just walk in and one-shot them, right? And like this one versus Crushing Hands, I walk in and one-shot them with Crushing Hands too. So this build walks in and one-shots them, Crushing Hands walks in and one-shots them. It doesn't matter. So what I would say to someone is, if you have a build that you think is fun, look at the mechanics of that build and see, can the damage go high enough that I can do Torment 4? And even that, like, that's only if you want to. Obviously, everything, it's a game, have fun. Everything is only if you want to. But if you want to just be in Torment 4, kind of in the end game of this stuff, you need a certain amount of damage and a certain amount of survivability, okay? But other than that, you don't need to go as over the top as something like this build is, okay? The only place that this matters is when you're pushing pits. The rest of the game, it doesn't matter at all. You can play something that does way less damage and have just as much or more fun, okay? So don't feel like you're locked into playing this because it's the best build or anything like that. But yeah, if you do, this is how it's built. When you start to add in mythics, you just replace. So like if I got the chest piece that everybody's wearing, you just stick it in here and you move this affix to like the legs, and that's it, right? Or if you get a Harlequin mask, you just put it in here and just don't use this ferocity aspect, right? That one just goes away. I wouldn't do anything. I would just masterwork the Harlequin and then stick it in this slot, right? And that's it. That's how the build is done. That's how it's played. I'll maybe put out some videos showing you guys what I do with the Crushing Hands build as well. Maybe showing 100 cleared with this build and with that build, so you can see that they clear 100 in the same time. And the reason I say 100 is because that's where the rewards basically max out. Like you'll get more XP for other ones, but as far as like upgrading your glyphs and stuff like that, you don't get any better like chance to upgrade from anything above 100, right? So the 100 is, if you can clear 100 fast, you're golden. There's really no reason to clear anything higher than that ever, unless you just want to, or you just want to see like, what is this character capable of right now, right? As with most things in Diablo, it's mostly like a gear and build check. It's not really a mechanics spec, right? I'm an old washed up gamer with little to no mechanical skill, and this build works just fine. A lot of builds in Diablo end up playing relatively simple, right? My damage button is Quill Volley, right? And I press Armored Hide to make my Quill Volley do even more damage, right? So the build is simple to play. But yeah, that's the basic. That's how I'm doing it. That gives you an idea of how you do it without like optimal stuff, but with good stuff that you're finding along the way. And yeah, like I was saying, I'll maybe put out some stuff about crushing hands, or show some gameplay of this one. Maybe I'll clear a 120 or something, and show just like how much damage the build does, and maybe show this one and the crushing hands on 100, or maybe show them in like the Undercity or something. The Undercity is comical. You absolutely just run through it. You don't even need anything close to what either of these builds can do to do like the Undercity or the what are they, Infernal Hordes? And yeah, the Infernal Hordes from the compasses. Like none of that stuff needs anything close to that. So when you're doing a build, learn how this one works so you can take advantage of it for some other build that you find fun on the Spiritborn, but don't feel like you're locked into this one. If you do want to play it, it is fun. But yeah, if you don't want to play it, don't feel like you have to just because it's the meta. All right, go out there and give the minions of hell some whooping.